you obviously work with some huge global brands. Just thinking about the marketing and brand part of kind of what COVID has changed. Is there any work that you guys yourselves have done that you've been really proud of that is now kind of seen through that COVID lens?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's funny because I think a lot of brands have took a little while to work out if they played a role, if that makes sense, especially from a marketing point of view. Because if you're selling beans, then actually lots of people are buying even more beans than ever, and kind of we don't play a big societal role. But then at the other end of the scale, you've got some brands who are like big high street, mainstream brands that play an important role day to day. So an example of two brands I work on are Tesco and Barclays. So obviously one is about how can I feed my family, especially when everybody's at home, and how do I do it safely? And if you're Barclays, going, how do I make sure my money is in a good place, I can access it, and my financial world's changing so much, how can you help? So working on that end of brands has been really interesting. One thing I spend a lot of time talking to clients about, you know, as marketeers, we've spent so long talking about purpose-led brands and how actually we need a purpose. People buy into why you exist. You need something bigger than just we have ATMs. For me, I've always enjoyed that because it's quite customer-centric, but it often feels very different to how a brand and a business really works. Whereas for me during COVID, it feels like we've had to shift to being more purposeful than just purpose-led. And by that, I mean actually not just being stuck in the ether of this thing keeps us going for 100 years. Here's the real, you know, top of the pyramid Maslowian thing that we love. It's going, no, you've got to be much more tangible. You've got to have much more evidence, and you've really got to get in the trenches. And I think COVID's made that happen. So I'm super proud of the work that we've done with Tesco. I mean, as a business, the way they've responded so quickly to make their stores safe for staff and for customers open. And the fact they've like trebled their delivery footprint just to help get food out to who needs it. All the work they've done, Nightingale Hospital, and you know, and supplying the NHS and so on. That's been amazing because you're taking a business whose strength is that operational capability, and you're actually plugging it into something to make a real difference. So that's a good example, I think, of being purposeful, serving grit and shoppers a little better every day. They're proving it and they're evidencing it. So being tangible and being evidence-based suddenly feels really good, and we're actually having a difference.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good thought, isn't it, around the distinction between being purpose-led and purposeful, and the latter obviously being, as you say, much more that kind of tangible, real, you're actually making a difference in a very kind of evidence-based way, rather than in a slightly more kind of perhaps esoteric philosophical way.
Passive,
and I would imagine, and I'm sure you guys have been thinking about this, that as we kind of evolve into different versions of new normal, that will be increasingly customer and a consumer expectation. Because there was that kind of, particularly with Gen Zs and millennials coming through, much more kind of activist group of people. I think that's going to be on steroids, I think, isn't it, as we kind of move forward?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's value and values a lot of the time. So everything we've done during COVID, we've had a clear enemy, if you like, to aim at. But how do you extend that and make that work for the long term? How do you take the things that we've learned in terms of being more tangible and keep dripping that through? Because the danger is, I think we've done really well at COVID, and then we just flip back to going, let's just sell stuff and have fuzzy black brand strategy over there as well.
And outside of, I guess, your own portfolio of clients, are there any other brands that you've kind of observed and kind of gone, that's really quite interesting what they're doing?
Given that I work for an agency, I'm only ever going to say how good my own clients are, obviously.
How naive of me.
No, I think it's very fair. I think probably not a list of names per se, but I think it's been a good chance for brands to actually stand up and prove they are worthy of something, that they're not just the advertising, they're not just the funny logos and the funny colours, they can actually make a difference. And a weird way, you know, the NHS as a brand has really come to the fore, you know, realising that behind the NHS, this huge culture of nurses, doctors, work, service care and so on. A weird way, I think they've absolutely nailed it and have probably become the most famous brand out of all of it. But again, it comes back to they've had to be, I guess, but it's so tangible. And to your point about different cohorts wanting to feel something more evidence-based and see proof in the pudding, you know, they've been amazing. So it's quite funny seeing the NHS become a brand, like people wear the badges and the thank you signs and so on. Yeah.
And I guess what's been interesting about it, of course, which is obviously the holy grail of so many brands, is actually people on the ground doing their marketing for them. So as you say, with the rainbows, with the clap for carers, was essentially user-generated content, right?
Yeah, totally.
So it is fascinating. And I think particularly pre-COVID, there was always so much fear about perhaps a dismantling of the NHS. In some respects, I guess COVID has kind of been a complete, I don't know, has completely reimagined the NHS as so vital, which of course most of us knew that. But no, I think it's a really interesting observation. So we've kind of raced through our chat. So the final question, which I always like to be a bit philosophical in these things, is what have you learned most about yourself through this whole experience?
Probably two things. I think the first is that I definitely haven't lost my northern love for wearing shorts all the time. I have to confess, because of Zoom call now on wearing shorts. I don't think I've worn a pair of like jeans or similar since March, because I've managed to get away with it with video calls. But more importantly, I think from an agency and market and even business point of view, is that I think culture is a competitive advantage. And by that I mean, I think most businesses have the same tech and the same data, or can certainly access the same data about markets and customers and so on. Yeah. We've all got the same stuff. The bit that gives us a competitive advantage, or that can make us different, is the culture. And that's having the right mix of people all brought together in the right circumstance. And I think as soon as we force people away, we've realised how important that is. So for me, I've always felt quite big on culture, but it's the first time I've gone, this is what makes us different, actually. There are so many agencies out there. We've all got access to the same stuff. It's our culture that makes us what we are.
And I guess that's a really interesting point, though, isn't it? In terms of everyone being so remote, and how one harnesses and kind of keeps that culture really strong is A, difficult. But I think if you've got a good, strong culture in the first place, you've got a much better chance of making sense of it. Whereas if you've got a weak culture, you're probably a bit screwed, aren't you?
No, I agree. And it scares me the thought of, oh, maybe we don't need an office anymore. And behaviour might change. I mean, it might be some at home, some at work. But it's less about, I think, sitting together or being in the same place. It's about how do we come together? Because I think it's the coming together that makes the cultures, and that makes the creativity, makes the spontaneity, as you say, and that makes the ideas. So that is the most important thing for me, I think.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time and for your sage thoughts, Simon. Absolute pleasure to chat to you again. So, so stay safe, keep doing cool things, and I will speak to you soon.
Yeah. Chat soon, Dawn. Thanks a lot.
Take care now. Bye-bye.